Hey Jay, this is Anthony from Illinois. I wanted to call in and offer some thought and just some ideas to chew on about the conflict I've seen over the idea of freedom of speech in response to Charlottesville, but also maybe more broadly to some of the far right speakers such as Ann Coulter, Milo Yiannopoulos, and others. When I was listening to Nick from California's comments a couple episodes ago and the segments on nuclear policy and things like that, I kind of find myself agreeing that I don't know if I can hold the ACLU itself completely and wholly accountable for the violence that happened in Charlottesville, even though I think that their decision to have the rally and support the rally was a mistake. And I'll kind of get into that a little bit more. Why I don't think the ACLU is in a necessarily bad spot was that I think that they, as Nick kind of illustrated in his own comments, I think they kind of took things, it seems at face value, that on face value it seemed almost as if this was a purely freedom of speech issue, a pure issue of this idea of wanting to share opinions in a public sector, in a public sphere. And, normally in my old life as kind of more of a classic liberal, I would tend to agree. I think that there should be this idea of a broad freedom of speech for all persons. But one of the things that I'm kind of struggling with, and maybe you or others who are more enlightened on this area can offer, is one of the things that I've seen in a response to why violence seemed to have sprung out of Charlottesville. For me, it hasn't seemed to have been as a response to Antifa, but some of the sources that I've seen have talked about how leading up to this event, I think, months, weeks, and days beforehand, there was a real presence online of persons who decided that they were going to agitate for violence and agitate for turning this rally from something that is, a quote-unquote free speech rally to something else entirely. And it doesn't surprise me necessarily because I think that people are kind of aware, if this is an idea that if we come out outright and say that we might be seeking violence or that our words can be taken violently, I think a lot of people, even, free speech absolutists, might be more hesitant to defend these people. But one of the things I've been kind of struggling with is I kind of wonder to a certain extent how informed the ACLU keeps themselves on different cases. I was thinking about what's happened in Berkeley over the past couple of months and how I think kind of a similar pattern of things has come out where you'll see people saying, even though Milo's message is abhorrent, he still deserves the right to speak. Or, Ann Coulter's views are repugnant, but because free speech, they have to be allowed to speak. But one of the questions I will return to again is when some of these intentions become more clear of, the possibility to lead to violence. I'm thinking of some of the responses I've seen who, dug in deeper to figure out that Milo's initial speech or at least one of his initial speeches that he planned at Berkeley was to out transgender and undocumented persons on campus and therefore could indeed leave them open to being harassed, perhaps physically targeted and things like that. So I guess what I'm struggling with is when the possibility is there and when there are outside forces who are proclaiming that they will be there with the intent, all intents and purposes of committing violent acts, does that, in my opinion, it should, but does that mean that we excuse protecting persons, especially persons who are marginalized and oppressed, or protesting nonviolently? Does that mean that we leave them open to the risk of being harmed? It's just something that I think it's an issue I have not seen touched on in a lot of aspects, and I'm trying not to avoid sounding unrealistic and assuming that, the ACLU and other groups can be informed on everything at all times, or that, perhaps we shouldn't give people the burden of the benefit of the doubt. But I don't know. It's just something that I think needs to be discussed further, because I don't think the far right now represents anything, in my view, remotely close to freedom of speech. But it seems to me that they're seeking more actively to push the envelope to see what can and cannot be said. And I think that more people will lose their lives if we can't find a way to nuance our understandings of free speech in the ways that we've seen other countries and other persons argue for. I apologize for the length of this message, but I just wanted to get some things off my chest and hear your thoughts and the thoughts of others as we continue to move forward in these difficult times. Thanks for the great work, Jay.